Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this webinar about autism. Today's Autism Awareness Day. So my name is Anna Naumenko. I'm a business psychologist at Thrive. And I'm also a parent to an autistic child. So I've got special interest in autism, some first-hand experience and quite a lot of knowledge on this topic. And I'm really happy to share it with you today. So just a quick disclaimer before we begin. I don't know if you're aware that there's actually a debate about how it is better to describe people with ASD, which stands for autism spectrum disorder condition. So some people say autistic people, some people say people with autism. And so research shows that many adults prefer to be described as autistic individuals because they view autism as a central and defining element of their identity, similar to gender or race. Person with autism is favored by those who see autism as just one element of their identity. And I understand this, these terms can be emotion provoking for people. And when you're talking with someone, it is best to follow their lead, of course, and use the terminology they prefer. But in this webinar, I had to make a decision for myself. So I will be using identity first language. So I'll be saying autistic people, and I hope that I hope not to offend anyone about this. Yeah. So firstly, I wanted to give a quick overview about what we are going to cover today. So firstly, I'm going to talk about some facts and stereotypes about autism. Then I'm going to explain how autistic individuals process information, how they communicate with the world, and how this can impact their well-being and everyday life. And finally, as we are all in the workplace context here, I will talk a little bit about how you can support autistic people at work. So there's a chat and Q&A function, so please feel free to use both of them, and I will try to answer all questions at the end. Autism is defined as a lifelong disability which affects how people communicate and interact with the world. And there are approximately 700,000 autistic adults and children in the UK. So in other words, on average, 1 person in 100 is diagnosed with ASD. So it is a spectrum condition, which means that some people may require more help and support than others. And of course, despite some autistic people sharing certain characteristics, every autistic person is different and individual in their needs and preferences. Yeah, I think I can see somebody's hand. No, not anymore. Okay. So there are quite a few myths about autism, and I believe that this condition is not very well understood even among professionals. And I think we are gradually building this understanding, and we do not understand everything. The general audience also has, I think, have a lot of different stereotypes. So I guess if you ask a non-professional what an autistic person looks like, they would probably imagine a boy interested in some weird stuff like trains, dinosaur postcodes or numbers, sitting in a corner of the classroom and arranging their weird stuff in neat rows similar to the ones you see on the slide. And so also this boy is apparently unable to make contact with other people, and they generally lack empathy, cold-hearted, not interested in social interaction. He's also quite likely to have speech or language difficulties, and so he's sitting quietly in that corner playing with his stuff. He might be also very sensitive to loud noises and bright lights, and so he would often freak out, and if he's disturbed by loud noise and bright lights, he will often freak out and start flapping their hands as a bird or twirl, run around in circles. And he's also extremely fond of routines and rituals. So this kind of scene would repeat itself every day. So kind of this kind of collective example of what I find people when I talk to people and about what they know, what they know about autism, what they think looks autistic. This is what people normally tell. And I just wanted, I put this all on the slide, and I just wanted to talk about each of them in more detail, because some of them are true and some of them are not. So let's start with the boy. So originally, it has been believed that about 95% of all autistic people are male. And now we know that girls and women on the spectrum may present quite differently, which is why they often go under the radar and either do not get their diagnosis at all, or get diagnosed later in life. And on average, in children, girls get their diagnosis 2 or 3 years later than boys. So now we know that females constitute about 25 to 30% of all autistic individuals. So yes, boys and men are more likely to be autistic, but girls and women are not that unlikely to have it as well. Then the second thing is interested in weird stuff. This is what people often say. So autistic people do have intense interest, which means that if they're interested in something, they would find everything about the topic, and they would be very keen to talk about it with other people, and maybe much less keen to talk about other stuff. However, it is wrong to believe that the interests are weird. For example, a typical interest for girls or women might be animals, makeup, certain book characters, stationery. So the topic itself might be very unremarkable, very typical, but the intensity and the amount of knowledge that a person would have on the topic is really remarkable. So this is particularly evident if we look at small children aged, say, 3 to 5 or 7 years, because their neurotypical peers might also have strong interests, but the amount of knowledge that autistic children would have, the amount of facts they memorize and technical details about their topic is really extensive. So this is really remarkable. And then arranging things in roles. So this is what normally said about autistic children. This is quite true. So autistic people do like order and structure, and I will explain a little bit later why. And they do tend to organize and structure their possessions. But of course, not only autistic people can be organized, and we can see other children that are also very neat and organized without being autistic. What is really specific for many autistic children is that they arrange their toys, say, neatly in rows, like you see in this picture, but then they they can spend hours in that, and then they're not playing with them, they're just arranging them. So this is quite typical. And so autistic adults, they normally remain quite organized and typically use extensive to-do lists, spreadsheets to keep track of their projects, project management software, all this kind of stuff, which is, of course, as I say, maybe typical for neurotypical people as well. Then cannot look people in the eye and lack empathy, cold-hearted, not interested in social interaction. So I believe that this is probably the central misconception about what autistic people are. So yes, autism is defined as a social communication disorder, and autistic people often struggle to understand their own emotions and other people's emotions. And this might lead them sometimes to being unable or struggling to take other people's perspective and not taking into account other people's needs. However, in most autistic people, it has nothing to do with the with cold-heartedness and lack of motivation to socialize and interact. So autistic people do find it hard to socialize for a number of reasons, especially in big groups. However, they are normally quite keen to have relationship, and they do have close friends, and many autistic adults also have partners, families, and children. So I believe that it is wrong to believe that these are some unsociable people sitting in the corner, not interested in other people. Then there's speech and language difficulties. So this is another typical concept about autistic people, and it is partly true. And so the truth is that language development in autistic children might be atypical and might be different to that of neurotypical children. For example, many autistic children start talking later, or they might start talking at a normal time, and then they lose speech or partly lose speech for some time, and then they quiet again. So this might be a diagnostic criteria. But yeah, and also as autistic children and autistic people as adults might have some difficulties understanding humor, metaphors, figurative speech. However, as adults, only about 25 to 30% of all people diagnosed with autism are nonverbal or have severe speech difficulties. The rest have overall normal speech, so you wouldn't kind of notice that there's something wrong. And next thing is sensitive to loud noises and bright lights. So this one is very true. And so processing everyday sensory information can be difficult for autistic people. And it's not necessary for each individual. It's not necessarily noises or lights. So it can be any of their senses, maybe oversensitive or undersensitive, or both at different times. So, and these sensory difficulties, they actually, so it might seem like a kind of standalone thing and like a minor thing, but in the reality, they can have a profound effect on a person's life, because many autistic people experience being overly sensitive to noise or light, touch, smell, whatever. They can easily experience sensory overload or information overload, and this can cause stress, anxiety, and they can also experience this as physical pain, and then it might lead to withdrawal, some really distressed behavior, meltdown. And for neurotypical people who are not familiar with this kind of behavior, who are observing this from outside, it might not be quite obvious what the reason is, because autistic individuals are really capable of noticing really minute details, and their sense, the way they process sensory information is very different. So when other people do not notice anything in particular, autistic people can react in this very intense way, and this may seem very, very strange. And neurotypical people might not understand what's going on. So, for example, some individuals notice the tiniest piece of fluff on the carpet, or complain about moths flying in there, like air particles. Or some people look down most of the time because of the the lights being too bright for them. Maybe frightened by sharp flashes of light, or fluorescent lights for such people in fluorescent lights, they can see this 60 cycle flickering. So for them, the whole room would be pulsating on and off. So this is really can be really intense. And people with hyperhearing are generally very light sleepers. They are frightened by sudden unpredictable sounds. For instance, telephone ringing, baby crying. They might dislike thunderstorm, crowds, be terrified by haircuts. So all sorts of different noises might be very, very uncomfortable, and these people might cover their ears when the noise is painful for them. At the time when others, like in the same room, may be completely unaware of any disturbing sounds at all. Then some people are overly sensitive to smells, so they cannot tolerate how people or objects smell, though their, say, family members can be unaware of any smell at all. And they can, as children, they can run away from smells, move away from people. They can insist on wearing the same clothes all the time. And for some, the smell or taste of normal, quite regular food might be too strong. And then they can reject food, even if they're very hungry. And these people are usually poor eaters. They can vomit easily. Some of them can eat only certain types of foods, and some may develop very specific eating disorders. So because most eating disorders in neurotypical people are driven by the poor body image. So in autistic people, it's not really, in some of them, it's not related to body image at all, but it's about the textures and the smells of food. And also, many autistic individuals are hypertactile, so they pull away when people try to hug them because they don't like being touched. And for example, I met a person who said that even a light handshake for them feels very painful. And this is not about the pressure the person's applying, but like they experience it as a burning sensation. And so many people would refuse to wear certain clothes as they cannot tolerate the texture on their skin. And some people might have vestibular hypersensitivity, so which means that they're experiencing difficulty changing directions and walking or crawling on uneven or unstable surfaces. They can be not very good at sports and might feel very disorientated after spinning, jumping, or running. So yeah, so I'm not saying that a typical autistic person would have all of this, but in general, these are very typical in different combinations. And as I said, it really impacts your life. So it might seem like a very kind of so it really impacts their life because it's everywhere, and you encounter this all the time, and all the time you receive that information and sensory overload. So this is a really big issue. Yeah, then flap hands or twirl is also mentioned as a typical autistic behavior. And there's actually a special word for this type of behavior. It is called self-stimulation or stimming. And actually almost everyone, all people included, engage in some form of self-stimulating behavior. So you might bite your nails, twirl your hair around your fingers when you're bored, nervous, or need to relieve tension. And it can normally it becomes such a habit that we don't notice. And sometimes we are not even aware we are doing it, like tapping our finger or tapping our foot. And for most people, it's a very harmless behavior, and most of us recognize when and where it becomes inappropriate. For example, if you've been drumming your fingers on your desk for 10 minutes, and you can take social cues and that you are irritating others and choose to stop. Now, in autistic people, this type of stimming might be more obvious, and it may present, say, as full body rocking back and forth, twirling, bouncing, jumping, flapping the hands. All this kind of stuff. It can also go on for long periods, and autistic people sometimes can be less aware that this behavior might be disruptive to others. And normally this is done when people are anxious and trying to relieve stress, or, for example, if they're experiencing that sensory overload, overstimulation, like when people feel that they're the noises that are loud, they can start humming and do something to block that noise. Yeah, finally, I've got here follow routines and rituals. So this is true. Sorry. So most autistic people dislike and resist change as much as possible, as they like things to stay stable and constant. And I'll come to that a little bit later. Why is that? And if something needs to be changed, they need as much notice as possible before that to get used to the idea and to adapt to that. I'll quickly look at the chat if we've got any questions. I think we got a hand. So Caroline, would you like to ask something?
Thank you. No, I just wanted to know how many different sorts of autism is there. Can you have a very light form of autism? Because I think my daughter, I'm not sure, has a little form, because I can see some some of what you just show in her, but not everything. So I'm not sure. So.
Yeah, actually, as I said, it's a spectrum condition, so it's different in different people, and so currently. So at some point there was a diagnosis called Asperger syndrome. And now it's not recognized as an official diagnosis. Now there's only one diagnosis called autistic spectrum or autism spectrum disorder. And sometimes they say that like in the three levels, level 1, level 2, level 3. So level 1 would be a really mild symptoms, and especially if you say that it's your daughter. I'll come to that later. But autism does present differently in girls, because girls in general, so there's this thing that's called masking, so trying to fit in. So if a person has a high IQ, so if they're quite intelligent, and they see that their kind of their normal behavior does not fit in, they understand what they need to do in order to fit in. So they would mask a lot, or try to behave in the ways that are expected from them. So in certain situations that are typical, like everyday situations, they would learn certain types of behavior, and they would seem completely normal. But so the only situations where you would see them behaving in a more strange way, or kind of not reacting appropriately, for example, or doing more of those steaming behaviors, little things, would be when it's an unfamiliar situation, so they don't know how to react. They need time to assess the situation. So yeah, if you feel that your daughter is displaying certain symptoms and you are worried, or you would like to help her, I will recommend a couple of books that I found myself really helpful. Because my daughter, I've got a daughter with autism, so she was diagnosed quite late, and so the books that I found helpful, and yeah, I'll recommend them.
Can you give the reference? Maybe?
Yeah. I'll show the slide where I've got some
okay, thank you very much.
Useful resources, and I've got a hand from Martin. Oh, from Sarah, sorry. From Sarah, yeah? What do I need to do? I need to...
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Ah, lovely. Yeah, my sister-in-law has had a diagnosis recently, and she's 55, and it was when my mother-in-law passed away. She's also been diagnosed with severe learning disabilities as well. So the masking side of things, all her life she's struggled and she hasn't worked, but she never got a diagnosis, so was never on the radar. And we've recently gone private and got her diagnosed. But when we're sort of applying to try and get her support and things like that, when anybody asks her a question, she doesn't always have the ability to be able to answer the question, but she will agree. So if somebody says to her, can you do this? She will just say yes. And we're finding that it's quite difficult actually, in terms of when you're trying to get her social care, social support. As I said, she's never worked, and she doesn't really have the ability, because she's very slow at things as well, and gets quite distressed if anything changes. So in terms of the masking, how do you get other people, whether it be social services, whether it be DWP, to understand that she says yes as a way to fit in, as opposed to she doesn't actually understand? So when I question her more, she can't answer that, but they don't, because they're only kind of interested in a can you, can't you?
That's a tough question, because I believe that so as I said in the beginning, so most, even people who are supposed to know and to be professionals and to know a lot about autism, they don't, especially in women. So many, I know quite a few women who have been diagnosed late in life, and because it comes under the radar, or they can have some other, say, learning disabilities, I don't know, ADHD,
Yes,
or coupled with. on top of this, and so then it concentrates on these learning disabilities, for example, at school and then later, and nobody understands. And yeah, so unfortunately, I know about a few big charities that deal with autism, and they try to disseminate more information.
Right.
So I believe that, and like recently, I read a leaflet for professionals, especially a leaflet about masking specifically, and telling that kind of how important it is that professionals do not recognize the importance of masking, and like a person comes in therapy and they mask, and the therapist does not recognize that, and then they can't work with them properly. So I don't really know. I think that the only way forward is to look for people who specialize in that. If you want, I can send you some names and links to. I know quite a few people who specialize in female autism, so maybe we'll be able to advise you, because it's a huge thing that women do not get proper diagnosis and struggle for a really long time. I will send you some links later.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, so if we don't have any more hands, I guess I'm trying to look at the Q&A. So yeah, what event leads to people being diagnosed later in life? I'll come to that. Yeah, I'll come to this later. Yeah, so yeah, basically what interested me. So this webinar is called Understanding Autism, and for me personally, it was always important to understand how things work and why they work this way. So when I became interested in autism, I was wondering how all these kind of set of traits like inflexibility, avoiding eye contact, steaming, why do all these kind of seemingly random things come about? And is there any kind of logic or structure? Is there any core reason behind it? And this is still an under-researched area, but from what all I have read and heard from autistic people firsthand, I believe that the key autistic trait is the extreme detail orientation, which might be due to specific brain organization. So there's research that has shown that the connectivity in different parts of the brain in autistic people is different from that in neurotypical people. So they have more connections in the areas processing sensory information. This is why they can experience physical sensations very, very differently and very intensely. And at the same time, they can have fewer connections in other zones. And so I believe it might seem like a small thing, this detail orientation, but I think actually personally that it can really define how autistic people perceive the world and communicate with the world. And actually it can explain many traits. So a little bit like in this cartoon on the slide, where a neurotypical person sees a forest, an autistic person not just registers separate trees, but like each leaf with its color and smell, and whether it's trembling in the wind or it's just falling off. And they see like notice the bark, whether it's rough or smooth, and like tiny drops of crystallized sap. And so they easily notice all of these details. But because there's so many and they can be jumping at you, they do struggle to integrate them all together. So a bit like in this, again, in this cartoon, like trees, the trees obscuring the view of the forest. So in order to see the forest, their brain needs to synthesize all these almost in a conscious manner. So they need to use their analytical skills and similar to a detective working on a mystery case. And this, of course, takes a lot of effort and a lot of resources. And that is why they can easily experience overstimulation, information overload, because so many sounds, touch, smells, everything can be unbearable for them as they can physically experience them very intense. And this sensory overload then leads to meltdown or shutdown. And then another thing is overstimulation is actually the reason why some autistic people avoid making eye contact, because not because they're not interested in the person they're talking to, but because it's just too intense for them. Just staring a person in the eye is too intense. Because also many people may, unlike common misconception that autistic people lack empathy, some people are really very sensitive to other people's emotions, and so this kind of very direct and close contact is just too intense, and that's why they avoid making eye contact, not because they're not interested. And also this detail orientation is the reason why autistic people are so very change averse. Because even if you imagine that you need to integrate all those sensations, all those little details in order to grasp the context. So if just a couple of these minor things change, a couple of details, it means everything changes for an autistic person. They need to reassess and reconsider the whole situation again. So again, this requires so much of their resources that this is why they do love routine and structure, in order to feel safe, that nothing is changing and save energy on this mental analytical process. And finally, this detail orientation, it also impacts the way autistic people are processing emotions. So they also do it in an analytical fashion. So what comes very quick and easy and intuitive for neurotypical people might take a while for an autistic person, and in a social situation, especially, as I said, if it's an unfamiliar one, they might behave as I think Sarah just said that, just agree, or they might respond with some learned phrase, and that might not always be appropriate, and you can notice this. Or they can produce an emotional reaction with a delay because of this kind of almost conscious processing. So in this interpersonal communication, it might seem odd, it might seem strange how people kind of react, and their emotional responses may be different. And also some researchers call this context blindness. And I guess this is just the other side of the coin. So being too detail oriented means that you lose context. And this manifests, for example, in that autistic people often understand things too literally. So they sometimes not get jokes or metaphors or figurative language. So, however, this is not the case with all autistic individuals, because some, on the contrary, can be very skilled at making jokes if this is, say, the area of their interest, and they take time and effort to practice, and they do this in this analytical manner. So it is not the case with all people. And so to sum up what I've just talked about, traits of autistic people, I have listed some typical strengths that autistic people often have. And of course, each autistic person you might meet will be unique and talented in their own way, because apart from that, those autistic traits, that attention to detail, and each person has their own set of abilities. So, for example, if you have attention to detail and interest in technologies and equipment, then you might become an engineer. If you have this attention to detail and you're interested in art, you become a craftsman. So it's different, but there are certain kind of patterns that we can see quite often. So as I said, the first thing, attention to detail, is a talent that many autistic people have, and it is often linked with kind of technical aptitude, because for individuals who are very detail oriented, technical skills often come easily. And so many people many autistic people have this unique talent for learning the ins and outs of machines, systems, programs, and many make great software developers. There's this autism researcher called Steve Zilberman, who says that the correlation between autism and Silicon Valley should be celebrated. So this is quite true. And then, so many, as I said, about that whole analytical processing thing. So many people are very skilled at logical thinking. They're interested in facts, and they can be good problem solvers, because they notice so many details that other people overlook, so they can then analyze, put this together and come up with some solutions that other people would never come up with. And another thing is visually oriented. So not all autistic people, but many people who are on the spectrum are strong visual thinkers. And yeah, again, they can easily spot things that others may miss, and excel at some intricate work or engineering work. And yeah, interest in animals might be a bit odd here, but so I guess because many autistic people find other people too intense and hard to understand, because the way they process emotions, as I said, many autistic children develop strong bonds with their pets, and then in general a keen interest in animals, veterinary medicine, and so this is quite often. And also interestingly, some autistic individuals whose special interest happens to lie with people might become really good psychologists or psychiatrists, and I know quite a few people like this, which I guess, because we have this stereotype of autistic people being not empathetic, seems quite odd, but it's true. Yeah, so now I wanted to talk a little bit about more sad side, because so unfortunately, although autism is a neurodevelopmental condition, the risk for mental health problems in people with autism are generally higher than in general population. And a survey conducted in 2019, I think, found that 76% of autistic adults reported reaching out to mental health support in the last 5 years. And this actually includes all the most common mental health issues, which are anxiety and depression. So 94% of autistic adults experience anxiety, severe anxiety at some point. And I think, again, this is quite understandable if you think about that attention to detail. And if you perceive the world as ever-changing, even small kind of everyday situations, so that so for a neurotypical person, this is quite stable, nothing changes. But for autistic people, this is changing constantly all the time. And change and uncertainty create difficulties for all people. We know that from research, and from, and this is a wide known fact that change is one of the thing that triggers anxiety in all people. So it is no wonder that if you perceive the world as ever changing, it will greatly increase your anxiety, even around things that might seem minor to neurotypical people. And depression is also a very big problem, and which is the kind of I believe that masking that I talked a little bit about plays a great role here. So masking is when, yeah, as I said, an autistic person learns to unconsciously or consciously or subconsciously hide or suppress some of their behaviors, because they know that it doesn't fit in with non-autistic people's expectations. So they try to behave normal, but it is not what they would normally do. So kind of you constantly trying to control your behavior to constantly fit in. So this requires a lot of resource, and it's really exhausting. And masking is especially common in women and girls, which might be due to women and girls having more of that social motivation and motivation to fit in. And for girls and women, it's more important to be part of the society. Also because of, I believe, the social expectations, because as I started in the beginning with that image of a boy sitting in the corner. So it's kind of okay for a boy to be autistic, sitting in the corner. We have kind of get used to this idea. But for a girl, it's not okay. What our society believes. So girls are making an extra effort to fit in, to mask, and this is emotionally very exhausting. And so researchers believe that this is, and clinicians, that this might be one of the leading causes of depression, and then self-harm and suicidal ideation, suicide. yeah, so tragically, autistic adults and children are at high risk of taking their own lives than the general population. So this is partly due to the depression masking, and also because of the and a lot of people, autistic people, experience bullying, social isolation. This is another risk. Then they find it difficult to understand their own feelings of others. That also creates emotional difficulties. Also sleep problems, difficulty accessing just what Sarah just said, accessing post-diagnosis mental health support. So all these together, they increase the risk of suicide, and this is actually very, very sad. I see, I think, a couple of hands. What do I do with them? I lost my way. Oh, I guess, yeah, what did I do? So I don't know who was first. So I see Carol.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, hi.
So I just sort of alluded to in the chat about my grandson who, I mean, he has many sort of rituals and routines, all of which can be quite testing at time. And I think we manage as a family to deal with all of that. He definitely has anxiety too. The one thing that I know that my daughter really finds the most difficult, as I've just mentioned in the chat, is this reaction to anyone hurting themselves, or indeed him maybe hurting another child in order to get a reaction. Someone just answered my chat and said that, you know, children aren't naughty, he's reacting to his environment. That's very difficult to understand when perhaps he's been in his bedroom, he's perhaps been on his iPad, seems perfectly happy, and then for some reason he'll come out of his bedroom and go straight to his brother and push him over. His brother then cries, and then he laughs at that. So in those circumstances, you know, why has he suddenly just displayed that behavior?
I don't know, it's difficult to say. So did you try, when you ask him what provokes him, or
he's not classed as non-verbal, but I mean, he actually doesn't speak very much. So much of his words will just be repeating what you've said to him, and then randomly sometimes he might come out with a sentence of his own volition. But generally when you talk to him, if I was to say to him, Brody, why did you push your brother? He would say, Brody, why did you push your brother? And he'll repeat that. And obviously we try very hard not to react to what he's done, because that seems to then make it worse if we're giving him the reaction he wants. But it's equally very difficult for my daughter to see that one of her sons is hurting her other son. And so we've tried to come up with, you know, we've got a green circle and we tell him to go and sit on the circle. That was something the school implemented. But we're not really finding that very much is helping. And it's just the one thing that we struggle with.
Yeah, I guess it's very, 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 very hard. I'm not sure really that I've got an answer to this problem, like because you as you say, you're trying really hard, and you've implemented some things. I don't really know. It's so have you tried to talking with some autism specialists, like therapists? What do they advise?
Well, the school, obviously, he's in a special needs school, and there is an occupational therapist, but as perhaps many people who might be listening to this with children who are in school, you don't have access very often to the occupational therapist. There's actually a lack of them in schools. And you know, his school is brilliant, and they do the best they can, and they, you know, they say that he's very bright and he's age 6, he's starting to try and sort of learn now and learning to read, etc. But we just really don't. The question that someone's just said, PECs, my daughter's teacher in the class says that she would rather not use, we do use pictures, you know, physical pictures, but we don't use an iPad system to do that, because she feels that he has the words and would like to try and encourage him to use those words. That's his teacher's take on it. But no, I mean, occupational therapists don't seem to have been able to come up with a real answer. And I think you can cope with most things in life when it's within your family, but if it actually impinges on someone else, if your child is hurting somebody else, that's one of the most difficult things to deal with.
Yeah, I'm definitely agree. It must be really, really hard.
Mm.
Yeah.
Somebody on the chat said that he might be able to answer. I don't know if oh, okay, someone would like to come in, John B. So I'll shut up and let John B come in if that's allowed.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
John, I think I muted you. I think you can talk now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I'll just note that Howard had already mentioned that he probably might be able to have a word as well. So just for him probably to come in after. I've put something in the chat, which is, it probably looks a bit scary to some people, in that I did all sorts of strange things, or what might appear to be strange things when growing up. So I'm now mid-30s and had a really late diagnosis. But things like, and the examples I put in there are, yeah, no worries, Howard, are that, you know, I deliberately pushed the cigarette lighter in a car down so that it would heat up, and then I deliberately pushed it into the seat next to me just to see what would happen. Now, I knew what would happen. I'd worked out what would happen, but I wanted to see it. I wanted to experiment. And my mum was out of the car and then came back and sat in the car and went, "Mad, why is this car seat burning? Why is this going on? What are you playing at, silly little boy?" And that's one of many examples that I could think of where I did something that was sensational. And that's a really good word. I like that word anyway, because a lot of them would just be described as destructive. So I didn't catch the lady's name that was speaking a second ago, but you know, the description of a virtually non-verbal child coming out of a situation where they've, Carol, thank you, where you know, what you described and what I heard were that there's this child in a sated state doing something that they want to do, and they're enjoying it, and then after X amount of time, and it could be 10 minutes and it could be 4 hours, they've decided that that right now isn't sensational enough for them. It's not exciting enough for them. So they've come out of their room to come find other people, because that's where sensations are. And then they've seen somebody that they can affect. Now, of the people in the room, I imagine the other sibling is one of the only people that child could physically affect, i.e. push over or go and do something with that they'd be successful. Now, that doesn't sound pleasant, and I can imagine it's very distressing to watch one child hurting another. But all I hear is somebody who wants a sensation coming out and getting one, and that sounds really trite, maybe, or like it's you know, if you're looking at it just from a perspective of the other child, they have sat there and just been hurt for no reason. But actually, the child doing the thing is you know, just looking for something, looking for us, and that is a way for them to get it. Now, that doesn't make it easy to divert, and it might be something that needs to be treated in all sorts of different ways. Maybe the whole circle thing is a good shout. Maybe saying no, you can't do that is a good shout. Maybe yeah, and I don't know if this would work for me. I'm trying to imagine if when I was a child, would this have worked for me? You know, if somebody else, you know, stopped me, stood me still, and then pushed me backwards onto a beanbag, I could easily see myself actually enjoying that, because that's a new sensation and somebody's doing something to me. But also I could see that as maybe trying to realize that that might not have been pleasant. And then you can say, well, that's what you just did to them. Now, I don't know how those things would work, but that's the perspective that I'm hearing or coming from, because ultimately I'm very articulate for somebody with my level of mild autism. And when I was in, you said about specialists, I got really, really lucky when my diagnosis came about, and super fluky that that the local, I'm in the UK, and the local NHS provisions were shut down the month before I got a recommendation, which meant the local council had no option but to refer me to a private healthcare, because yes, I was verbal. I was verbal from like 4 and apparently had impeccable manners until I went to school and learned bad manners from others, says my mum. But essentially, because I didn't do too much socializing with young kids when I was that age, I actually did a lot of socializing with adults. So I had exceptional manners and exceptional vocabulary, and was able to do that. And I almost went backwards when I went to school, because suddenly there's these boring, stupid people that don't have good vocab and don't have good manners, and they make a mess. And I was like, cool, I can do that too. But anyway, the specialist that I saw said that over our 3-hour interview, it was only the final 15 minutes, half an hour, where she actually believed I was autistic. She thought the rest of the time, because I was able to be articulate, because I could make eye contact, because I have a relatively high IQ and quite strong comprehension, she just thought I was a dick, like everybody does. And it was only when a couple of things lined up together, and one of them was when she asked me to read a story to her, and I just looked at the book, I didn't look at her at all. She was like, that's one of like the key things where I was doing what I was asked. I was reading the story, I was being literal. And so I don't know if that helps, Carol, I don't know if that explains it, but that's just a perspective from somebody who may or may not have done something like that himself. And the one that really upsets me when I look back, I also put in the chat, I physically was in a truck with 2 people in the truck next to me and 3 people in the actual pickup part of it. And when someone else was getting on the back, I deliberately drove forward just a little bit, just enough so that he tripped and fell over. Now, I thought it was hilarious, and I said to everyone else, oh, sorry, my foot slipped. But I did it deliberately. And that's not something that's nice, and that's not something that's fun, but it was sensational. It was really fun. And recognizing that, understanding that, well, I didn't recognize it, I got told it. Now I know that, I've realized why I've had so many different hobbies in my life, and why most of my hobbies have physical, tactile sensations, because I enjoy it. But anyway, I've spoken for way too much, so I should probably let Howard or others come in. Hopefully some of this has helped people that are neurotypical get some perspective.
Thanks so much for sharing, John. I think this was very, very interesting and helpful. Thank you so much. Who else would like to talk? Oh, Howard, I need to allow. Yeah, I allowed.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Hi, thank you. No, I mean, John sort of summed up pretty well there, but I will say, obviously everyone is different. So there's no way for anyone to say why your son does what he does. Only he really knows. However, there is 2 parts I would see to that. One is, like John said, it's sensations, experiences. I love heights, but I can't go to the edge of anything high because I feel like I'm going to jump off. I don't want to die, but I want that sensation. I want that feeling. I want to know what it feels like. I touch everything. When I watch films, I'm looking at every single little bit of information, because the more information I can get into my head, the happier my head is, and I can become overwhelmed with it sometimes because I need to get more and more, and the more I get, the more I need, and it's almost like a high for me. That said, the other side of that is the depression side. It is a massive thing, and sometimes with us, or well, with me personally, I find that the cumulative effect of what we're going through over time is a bit like a pressure cooker. You bottle it up, you bottle it up, you bottle it up, you keep bottling it up, and sooner or later that's going to break. You're going to explode. And maybe whilst he seemed like he was sitting there doing something that was not related to anything else going on, in himself, he may well be thinking about things that happened a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, and it's just still there, and it's still bottled up. And as he adds to it, finally it breaks, and he just explodes with it. So there could be any number of reasons, only he will actually know, but there's a lot more to this. But the most important thing I will say for anyone who thinks they have anyone in their family who may be autistic is to get that diagnosis. It turned my life around. I spent almost my whole adult life until I was 49 thinking there's something wrong with me, not understanding why I couldn't be like anyone else, desperately wanted to be like anyone else. And when I finally found out that I was autistic, there was some sense of relief, because then finally I am normal. I'm autistic, and that's normal. That's okay. So now I can sort of concentrate on accepting that and accepting myself for who I am. And that has taken some of the pain that my life brings me away. Not all of it, but it helps, and every little bit you can do helps. So that's all I want to sort of try and help with, if that's of any help to anyone.
Yeah, thank you so much, Howard, for sharing. Actually, it answers. So one of the questions in the Q&A was what event leads to people being diagnosed in later life. So I guess Howard explained it beautifully. This is what I hear from most people who have been diagnosed late, is that they had this feeling that something was wrong with them, something was something was different, and then they either read something, someone told them, or they read a book and they started suspecting they were autistic, so they went for the diagnosis. And so also I hear a lot of people saying that it was really the best thing that happened to them, that understanding that puts all these pieces of puzzle together, and you get this revelation, and it's it really explains a lot and helps a lot. So yeah, I heard this. I hear this a lot from people. And there was one more question about do you have any tips on how to cope with how long the NHS referral process takes? It's been 8 months already, and will be half a year or more before I even get an appointment. And I struggle with not feeling normal, but at the same time not feeling able to tell my work friends because there hasn't been a diagnosis yet. I'm very sorry to say that I think the waiting times on the NHS are just horrendous. They're just so long. I don't know how long this is for adults, but for children, it takes years for some children, and I don't know whether the person who asked is female or male. So again, with females, it must be, sometimes it's even harder. Like, for example, with my daughter, we waited for 1.5 years, and then we got an assessment that it was during the pandemic, when she was spoken by a pediatrician on the phone for 2 minutes, and he asked her that whether she has friends at school and whether she and enjoy school. She said yes to both questions, and we received a letter that she's not autistic because she is managing social communication well enough. And yeah, then I had to write several other letters saying that the person who was diagnosing her was not competent and was not knowledgeable enough about female autism, how it presents, and all these kind of things. And then they said, okay, we can put you on the waiting list again at the end of the queue. And then we had to wait for another 2 years. And so we didn't wait, we then went privately, but just, I'm telling the story just to say that how sorry I feel that this keeps happening. And I don't know, actually, yeah, it's very long. So I think if you can, yeah, afford, and privately it's very expensive. So I believe that if you can afford it, then yeah, I would suggest doing it privately. But on the NHS, yeah, it can be years, unfortunately. And I don't know if anything can be done about it, but yeah, it's very long, very sad. Does anyone have any questions or would like to say something? And I'll look through the Q&A. Yeah, I actually wanted to show. I want to show you the books. Yeah, I'll do this now. So yeah, actually, I wanted to talk a little bit about how you can support autistic people at work. I will say just 1 minute. So my idea was that if you know that someone is autistic, if they told you, then yeah, the best thing is to have a conversation about and asking about what they need. And actually, so all people are different. Sometimes it can be some, if it's about sensory issues, can be some minor adjustments that might really help. And I can see that it's changing now, and people who are younger and who say they received some support at school and they have this experience of receiving the support, they sometimes can be quite articulate about what they want, what they would need, how they would like to organize. So they will be some of them would be quite open about what their requirements or requests, suggestions are. I think sometimes with older people, some of them just don't, especially if they are diagnosed late, they don't even know that some of the adjustments might be made. So I think that actually a conversation around this is key. Yeah, and yeah, just also wanted to note that yeah, just I know that many people, managers, might feel uncomfortable having those conversations because some people would say, I don't know what to say, I don't know what kind of whether we can provide those adjustments, or whether yeah, how to lead on this conversation. And I think that actually the main thing is to be open and to listen to what the person is telling. And also a good idea is not to say to a person who is disclosing that they are autistic, you don't look autistic. So I know that many people mean this as a compliment. I've heard this from neurotypical people saying that when they say you don't look autistic, they mean that you look quite normal, and this can be really offensive. Yeah, so I believe that if you avoid this thing, then an open conversation might really help. And these are yeah, the books. So there are some movies here. In a TV series, books there. So on top there, these are some fiction books. I think one of them, The Curious Incident of the Dog in an Atom, has already been mentioned in the chat. I didn't look through all messages in the chat because there are so many, but so I think it's a really good one. And the Graham Simpson, The Rosie Project, The Rosie Effect, The Rosie Result is also a very light read, and very I think it gives a good insight how a person with on the spectrum might feel. So for those who are just yeah, interested, yeah, maybe if you don't have a particular and the person you want to help, you just want to broaden your knowledge and read something about it. And then about so the last two books by Alice Rowe, The Girl with the Curly Hair, and by Sarah Hendricks, Women and Girls with Autism Spectrum Disorder. So they're both about females, and I think it's very important because there are more kind of, yeah, because they give this perspective on what autism look in girls and women. And the first one by Alice Rowe is kind of she tells about her own experience and how she perceives many things, and I think also it's very, very insightful. And so this lady, she also has a website that is called The Girl with the Curly Hair, and they have lots of resources on autism and suitable for different audiences, for small children, for teens. So I think this is a very, very, very good resource to look into if you want to yeah, maybe talk with the children, if you want to explain other children, and anything. And the second book by Sarah Hendricks, this is also a very good book. So this is more like a scientific account. So it is very, very structured, and it lists all different symptoms that you might see in females, and then it gives kind of citations from women whom she talked with to illustrate those examples. So so I believe this is one of the most structured book, like a compendium. So you can, so this is actually the book that I read myself first, that when it was suggested my daughter has ASD. So it really helped me to structure and to see many things actually that we found quite normal and typical. From that book I learned that this is actually characteristic for autistic girls. Yes, I wanted to say something else. No, I guess that's it for me. I can put this maybe in the chat, the names, and also I promised to Sarah that I sent you. I'll send the links to some female practitioners, to some those who specialize in female autism. I hope I will find Sarah's email. Yeah, so I guess thank you so much everyone for joining, and thank you so much for being so active in the chat. I haven't read everything, so if anyone has got questions, I'm happy to stay longer. yeah. Yeah, Lisa, I can see that. I hope that I wonder if I can get your email addresses, but yeah, I've got your names. I think we've got a list of attendants, and I could get your addresses from there, and then I'll email you personally when I put everything together, if that's all right. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, I will download all the comments, because I think that in Zoom I can download, and then I'll send everyone who asked for the slides or for the yeah, resources. I will email you. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And for those who write here that you suspect that your children have ASD, I think it's really yeah, I think it would be really helpful to try and get the diagnosis and try to get that assessment. I think it really really helps, especially when I think with smaller children it might be easier, but when they approach teenage years and they are so keen to explore themselves, and they have so many questions about why they're different. I guess every teenager would have them, but with autistic children, those teenage years, they I think, especially from my experience, they're especially difficult and demanding, and having the diagnosis really helps. So I think if you suspect, starting this process and researching earlier, I think it's a really good idea. Yeah, I guess for those who are asking for the slides, I guess we can just, yeah, I can email you individually, and maybe we can just email all the participants. I hope this won't be perceived as spam for those who didn't want them. Yeah, the recording, we normally put them on our YouTube channel in 2 or 3 days, so it will be there. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, thank you so much for everyone who shared their personal experiences. It was really valuable.